The Alpha King disguised as a beggar to test his pack. The starving Omega gave him her last meal. Famine had gripped the land like a cruel hand, and even the strong felt the pangs of hunger clawing at their bellies. In these desperate times, loyalty and courage were tested, and not all hearts proved true. At the center of this kingdom sat the grand castle of the Alpha King, a man both feared and revered. He ruled not just by strength but by wisdom, and his pack, those sworn to serve him, was the spine of his power. Yet, rumors reached him that his people were losing their way. Greed, pride, and ambition had begun to twist some hearts. If his kingdom was to survive the famine, he would need to know who was loyal, not to his title, but to the ideals of their pack. So the Alpha King made a decision few would dare. He would walk among his people, unseen, unrecognized, and in disguise. Only by seeing the truth of their hearts would he know if his pack could withstand the darkness that had fallen over Eldrath. He left the castle under the cloak of night, taking with him nothing but a tattered cloak, worn boots, and the weight of his crown hidden deep in memory. The streets of the villages were empty, save for shadows and the occasional flicker of candlelight in a window. His eyes, sharp even beneath the hood, caught every glance, every gesture. He saw people stealing, begging, hiding, but he also saw courage, kindness, and defiance. It was in a narrow alley between the ruins of a burned-down inn and a crumbling stone wall that he first saw her. She was small and fragile in appearance, her clothes torn and dust-stained, her hands trembling as she held a thin crust of bread. Her hair fell in dark waves over her shoulders, and her eyes, though tired, glimmered with determination. She was an Omega, weak in size but strong in spirit, and she had survived this famine by sheer will. The king, disguised as a beggar, approached slowly. Hunger gnawed at him, though he had taken precautions to endure the first few days. But it was not hunger that drew him to her, it was the quiet dignity in her stance. "Spare me a crumb," he murmured, voice low and hoarse. The Omega turned, startled, but her eyes softened when she saw his weakness. She could not know the truth of who he was, but she recognized suffering in another soul. Slowly, she stepped closer, holding out her last meal. "Here," she said, her voice small but steady. "Take it. You need it more than I do." The king looked at her, astonished. Most would have hidden their food, kept it for themselves. Some would have laughed. Yet she offered everything she had. He knelt, taking the crust and soup with a reverence he rarely showed. Each bite warmed him, not just in body but in spirit. Why help me?" he asked quietly. "Because no one should starve alone," she replied simply. "Even when there is nothing left, we must share what little we have." It was a simple answer, yet it struck him like thunder. This Omega, small and starving, held a heart braver than many knights and lords he had known. And yet he had to remain hidden. If she knew who he was, her generosity would lose its purity. As he ate, he studied her. He noticed the scars on her hands, the calluses from labor, the weariness that weighed down her spine. And he noticed the fire in her eyes, a defiance that refused to bow even to hunger. He felt a pull toward her, a strange connection that was both troubling and compelling. But the moment of peace did not last. A shadow fell across the alley. A figure emerged from the mist, one of the king's own lieutenants, a man ambitious and suspicious. The king stiffened. Recognition would bring questions, suspicion, perhaps even betrayal. He had to act before his cover was blown. "Go away," he whispered to the Omega. "Hide." Confused but obedient, she backed against the wall, clutching what little she had left. The king rose slowly, his frame taller than it seemed beneath the cloak, and stepped into the moonlight. The lieutenant's eyes widened. "Who are you?" the man demanded, suspicion lacing his voice. "I am no one," the king said, voice steady, calm, but carrying a weight that silenced the man. "Move along." The lieutenant hesitated, sensing the danger in his tone, but fear of discovery outweighed curiosity. He turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving only the faint echo of his boots on the cobblestones. The king exhaled, relief mingling with tension. He turned to the Omega, who had watched silently. "Are you safe?" he asked. "Yes," she said, though her eyes flicked nervously toward the alley. "But you should not be here alone," he smiled faintly. "Neither should you. Yet you showed courage and generosity even when you had nothing. That is why I am drawn to you." The Omega tilted her head, not fully understanding, but sensing something important in his words. She felt a warmth she hadn't felt in months, maybe years, though she could not place it. For the rest of the night they spoke quietly. He learned her name, Leora. She told him of her family, of the famine, of the small ways she survived each day. She spoke of her pack, those who had abandoned her and those she still trusted. And the king listened, each word etching itself into memory. He could see why she had survived, not just by luck but by courage, by compassion, by strength of spirit. As dawn approached, the first pale light of morning seeping through the fog, the king knew he could not stay. His identity must remain hidden, for the test was not over. His pack needed to be watched, to be judged by the same standards he had seen in Leora. But leaving her felt like tearing his heart from his chest. "Will I see you again?" she asked softly. He hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, but be careful. The world is not kind to those who are alone." Leora watched him disappear into the fog, clutching the memory of his presence like a flame against the cold. She did not know who he truly was, but she felt that her life had changed in the quiet moments shared in the shadows of hunger. The king walked away, hood pulled low, boots silent on the cobblestones. Yet every step away from her was a step heavier than the last. He had tested hearts tonight, and some had faltered, but Leora's had shone brighter than he could have imagined. The fog thickened around him, and in its depths he sensed eyes watching. Another shadow moved in the alleyways, unseen yet ever present. The games of loyalty and courage were only beginning, and the king knew that this was just the first night of trials. His pack, his people, and even this small Omega were threads in a larger web of fate. Every choice, every act of kindness or cruelty would ripple through the kingdom. As the first crow of the morning pierced the silence, the king paused on a hill overlooking the village. The wind carried the scent of smoke, bread, and distant flowers, but also something darker: ambition, fear, hunger, and power. He would return. He had to, because the next test would not be in the kindness shown to a stranger, but in the courage shown in the face of danger. And he knew, deep in the marrow of his bones, that Leora, the Omega who gave her last meal, would be at the center of it all. The sun rose over Eldrath, pale and cautious, as if it too feared what the day might bring. And in the shadows, the Alpha King smiled beneath his hood, for the games of loyalty, courage, and heart had only just begun. The morning sun rose over Eldrath with a pale, cautious light, cutting through the lingering fog like a blade. In the quiet village streets the people moved slowly, their faces lined with hunger and worry. The Alpha King, still in his disguise, observed from the edge of the forest, hidden beneath the folds of his tattered cloak. He had watched the village through the night, noting those who stole out of desperation, those who turned away from suffering, and those few who acted with courage or kindness. But it was Leora, the Omega who had given him her last meal, who stayed in his mind. Her face, framed by dark hair, her small but determined hands, and her unwavering gaze, it all called to something deep within him. She had survived the famine not by cunning alone, but through heart, bravery, and selflessness. Those were the qualities the king valued most. He moved quietly through the village, careful not to draw attention. Leora's home was a small, crumbling cottage near the edge of the forest, surrounded by withered trees and a patch of empty soil that once held herbs. The king paused at the doorway, watching her from the shadows. She was already awake, stirring a small pot of water and barley, the faintest hint of smoke curling into the morning air. She looked smaller in the daylight, and yet there was something in her posture, upright, cautious, yet unbroken, that made him marvel. Hunger had not bent her spirit. He stepped forward, speaking softly so only she could hear. "You should not be alone out here." Leora froze, her hands tightening around the pot. "Who's there?" she whispered. "I am a traveler," he said, bowing slightly, the hood shadowing his face. "I mean no harm. I only wish to speak." Her eyes narrowed, suspicion and caution mixing with curiosity. She could sense his presence was not ordinary. "Speak then, but step closer and I will defend myself." The king smiled faintly. She was fearless, even when the odds were against her. "I do not wish to fight. I only wish to understand the heart of someone brave enough to share her last meal with a stranger." Leora's hands faltered. I did what I thought was right, that is all." "Right or noble?" he asked quietly. "Sometimes the two are not the same." She tilted her head, unsure how to respond. The stranger's words held a weight she had not expected, and though she did not know why, she felt a strange pull toward him. A mix of curiosity, trust, and something she could not name. For several days he visited her quietly, always in the shadows, sometimes speaking softly, sometimes merely observing. He watched her work, her careful attention to small gardens, her efforts to mend tattered clothing, her quiet acts of kindness towards starving animals and children who wandered near. She gave without hesitation, even when it meant going hungry herself. The king found himself learning from her, not the lessons of power or battle, but the lessons of courage, patience, and heart. She reminded him of what was truly important, not just loyalty to a crown, but loyalty to the people, and loyalty to one's own principles. One night, as the stars glimmered faintly over Eldrath, he stepped closer, revealing more of his presence than before. They spoke of small things, of the weather, of the village, of memories long past, but every word carried a quiet weight. "Why do you wander here alone?" he asked, watching her fingers tremble as she stirred the pot. "My family, my pack," she began, her voice low. "They are gone. Those who remain, some are kind, but others, they take what they can and leave the weak behind." He felt a pang of sympathy, knowing all too well the burdens of leadership and loss. "It is hard," he said softly, "to see the world take from those who are least able to give." She looked up at him, her eyes catching the faint moonlight. "You understand." "I understand more than you know," he admitted. But he said no more, keeping the truth of his identity hidden. The nights passed, and with them an unspoken bond grew. Leora began to sense something unusual about the traveler, the way he moved, the strength beneath his cloak, the quiet confidence in his voice. And though she did not yet know who he was, she felt a sense of safety she had not felt in years. One evening the wind carried the distant howl of wolves. Leora stiffened, glancing toward the dark forest. "They are getting closer," she said, a hint of fear in her voice. The king, still cloaked and hidden, stepped beside her. "Then we must be ready," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Alone you cannot face them, together we have a chance." She looked at him, her eyes wide. "Together?" "Yes," he said, though he gave no further explanation. "Trust is the only shield stronger than steel." The night deepened. Wolves from a rival territory began to prowl closer, drawn by hunger and the scent of weakness. Leora grabbed a wooden staff, prepared to defend herself as best she could. The king, without revealing his strength, stayed beside her, guiding her movements, giving silent warnings and instructions. When the first shadow of a wolf appeared, he whispered, "Step back now." Leora obeyed, and the creature passed harmlessly, unsure of the courage before it. By dawn, the wolves had retreated, leaving only the echoes of howls in the distance. Leora exhaled shakily, her hands trembling. I thought I was alone." "You are never alone," the king said softly, "not if you are brave enough to stand." Her eyes met his, and for a brief moment, something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, respect, and a quiet, dangerous curiosity. She wanted to ask his name, to know who he really was, but the question caught in her throat. She was wary, yet drawn to him in a way she could not explain. Days turned into weeks, and the king continued his hidden vigil. He watched as she faced hardship with courage, as she shared her meager food with the weakest, and as she spoke to others with kindness even when they returned it with suspicion. Leora's spirit was unbreakable, and it both amazed and humbled him. One night, under the faint glow of the crescent moon, he took a risk. He revealed a small part of his true self, letting a flicker of his strength show when a group of bandits tried to steal her supplies. The bandits fled, terrified by a force they could not understand, leaving Leora staring in awe and fear. Who are you?" she whispered, clutching her chest. "Just someone who wishes to protect you," he said softly, retreating back into shadow before she could press further. Her heart raced. She felt something dangerous, something powerful, yet she also felt safe. And though she did not understand why, she found herself trusting this stranger more than anyone in the village. But danger was never far away. Within the pack, whispers had begun. The king's loyalists had seen movements they did not understand, actions that hinted at a presence unseen but undeniable. Some began to suspect that the beggar wandering near the village was not what he seemed. Loyalty and suspicion began to twist together, and the king knew that soon the tests he had begun would escalate. One morning, as he watched Leora from the edge of the forest, a rider approached from the distant hills, carrying a message sealed with the mark of the rival Alpha. The wind carried the news before the rider even arrived. Leora's courage and the stranger's presence had not gone unnoticed. The rival Alpha intended to take control, to challenge the bonds of loyalty within the king's pack, and to test the Omega herself. The king's heart tightened. He had hidden to observe, to test hearts, but now the stakes were higher. Leora was in danger, and the time for subtlety was ending. He could no longer remain fully hidden if he wished to protect her. That night, as the wind rattled the empty trees and the moon carved shadows across the land, he stood in the clearing outside her home. The scent of smoke and cold earth filled the air. Leora stepped out, holding a small lantern, her eyes wide and cautious. "They are coming," she said, voice trembling. "I can feel it." "I know," he said, stepping closer, revealing more of his presence than ever before. "And when they come, you will not face them alone." Her gaze met his, searching for answers she could not yet understand. "Who are you?" she asked again, voice barely a whisper. He said nothing. The answer would come in time. For now, she only needed to trust as he had learned to trust her heart. The night grew darker, and the first sounds of movement in the forest reached their ears. Leora tightened her grip on the lantern. The Alpha King, still cloaked but ready, prepared for what was coming. And in that quiet, tense moment, they both understood something. The bond between them had begun to grow, forged in shared courage, mutual respect, and unspoken longing. But the trials were only beginning, and the danger creeping from the shadows promised that the true test of heart, loyalty, and courage was yet to come. Branches groaned under a restless wind, and shadows moved where no creature should have been. The moon hung low and pale, like an unblinking eye watching the land of Eldrath. Leora stood at the edge of her small clearing, lantern in hand, her breath slow but steady. Fear was there, but so was resolve. Beside her stood the stranger, the traveler. The beggar with the calm voice and the eyes that carried storms. "They are close," Leora said quietly. "I can feel it in the air." The man nodded. His senses were sharper than he allowed himself to show. He could hear the steps, smell the intent, feel the weight of approaching danger. The rival pack had crossed into his lands. "They are not here for food," he said. "They are here for power." Before Leora could respond, the sound of hooves cut through the silence. Torches flared to life between the trees. Armed figures emerged from the darkness, their banners marked with the sigil of the rival Alpha, a black claw over red stone. Leora took a step back. "Stay behind me," the stranger said. A tall man dismounted from his horse and stepped forward. His armor gleamed, his smile sharp and cold. "So," the man said, This is the Omega who feeds beggars and draws attention. Leora lifted her chin. I feed those who are hungry. If that offends you, that is not my burden. The man laughed, bold words from someone with nothing. His eyes shifted to the stranger. And you smell wrong, too calm, too still. The stranger did not answer. That one comes with us, the man continued. The Alpha wishes to see her. No, Leora said instantly. I will not go. The man's smile faded. You will. Before the stranger could stop it, others moved in. The moment stretched, he could end this now. He could reveal himself, command them to kneel, call the forest to obey. But if he did, the test would end. Too soon, too loudly. He chose silence. Leora was taken. She did not cry out, she did not beg. She only looked back once at the stranger standing alone in the lantern light. Their eyes met and something unspoken passed between them. Trust. Then she was gone, swallowed by the forest and firelight. The clearing fell silent. The Alpha King stood alone, fists clenched beneath his cloak. The air around him seemed to tense, as if the land itself waited for his command. I will come, he whispered, no matter the cost. The ruined stronghold of the rival pack rose from the earth like a broken crown. Stone walls cracked with age, banners torn by wind. Inside, fires burned bright, and voices echoed with cruel laughter. Leora was brought before the rival Alpha at dawn. He sat upon a high stone seat, broad and powerful, his eyes cold and measuring. So, the rival Alpha said, you are the Omega who gave her last meal to a beggar. I gave food to someone in need, Leora replied. Nothing more. He leaned forward. Do you know what kindness looks like to hungry wolves? She met his gaze. Weakness to those who fear strength. A murmur spread through the hall. The Alpha's lips twitched. You are braver than you should be. I have nothing left to lose, she said. That makes me free. The Alpha studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, not kindly. You will stay, he said. You will serve, and in time you will learn loyalty. I already know loyalty, Leora said. It is not forced. His eyes darkened. We will see. She was taken to a high chamber overlooking the forest. The door locked behind her with a heavy sound. She sat on the cold stone floor, heart pounding but not broken. She remembered the stranger's voice, his calm, his promise. You will not face them alone. That night shadows moved through the rival stronghold. Guards fell asleep without knowing why. Doors opened without sound. Torches flickered as if bowed by unseen wind. The Alpha King walked through enemy halls as a ghost. He found Leora's chamber and paused outside the door. Inside, she sat awake. I knew you would come, she said softly before he even entered. He stepped inside, pulling back his hood just enough for her to see his eyes clearly. You should not trust so easily, he said. I trust actions, she replied, not names. For a moment he said nothing. They want to use you, he said, to weaken my pack. Her eyes widened slightly. Your pack, the silence stretched. He turned away. This place is not safe. We must leave. The door burst open. The rival Alpha stood there, flanked by guards. So, he said slowly, the beggar comes for his prize. The Alpha King straightened. The air changed. You should not have taken her, he said calmly. The rival Alpha laughed. And who will stop me? The Alpha King lifted his head. I will. Power rolled through the chamber, not loud, not wild, but absolute. The torches bent. The guards staggered back. The rival Alpha's smile faded. You, he whispered. That presence, it cannot be. The Alpha King removed his cloak. He did not need a crown. Authority lived in his voice, his stance, his very breath. I am the Alpha King of Eldrath, he said, and you stand in my land. Silence fell like a blade. The rival Alpha dropped to one knee without realizing it. His guards followed. Leora stared, heart racing. The beggar. The traveler, the king. You lied, she whispered. I hid, he corrected, to learn the truth. He turned to her. And you showed it. The rival Alpha snarled. You tested your pack with hunger and lies. I tested hearts, the king replied, and found yours empty. With a single command, the rival Alpha was stripped of power, his hold broken, his challenge ended, but Leora did not move. Her eyes were fixed on the king, not in awe but in hurt. "You watched me suffer," she said quietly. "You could have stopped it." He took a step toward her. "I wanted to protect you, but you did not," she said, "not until it suited your test." The words cut deeper than any blade. "I needed to know," he said, "who would stand when the world took everything." She stood slowly. "I stood because it was right, not to be tested." He had no answer. The hall emptied. The rival Alpha was taken away. The danger passed, but something else had broken. "I will return to my village," Leora said. "Alone." "You do not have to," he said. "I do," she replied, "until I know what your truth truly costs." She walked past him without another word. The Alpha King stood still, watching her go. For the first time since taking the crown, he felt the weight of his power, not as strength but as loss. Outside, dawn broke over Eldrath. And somewhere between shadow and light, the bond they had forged now stood on the edge of breaking, or becoming something far greater. Leora walked alone beneath a gray sky, her steps steady but her heart heavy. The forest watched her pass, branches swaying softly as if whispering questions she did not wish to answer. She no longer carried a lantern. She did not need one. The path was clear, even if her thoughts were not. The beggar had been a king. The kindness had been real. The silence had been real too. She stopped near the edge of the clearing where she had once shared her last meal. The memory burned brighter than the pain. She had given without knowing. He had watched while knowing everything. "I would do it again," she said aloud, her voice calm, "but I would not choose blindness." Behind her, far away, the Alpha King stood upon the high balcony of his castle, staring at the same forest. He had won. The rival Alpha was defeated. His lands were safe. His pack bowed deeper than ever before, yet the victory tasted of ash. "She left," one of his advisors said quietly. "I know," the king replied. "They say she returned to the village." "I know," the advisor hesitated. "Should we bring her back?" The king turned slowly. His eyes were tired, not cold. "No," he said, "I will go to her." The advisor's breath caught. "You would leave the throne." "I will carry it with me," the king replied, "or it will carry nothing at all." The village had changed. Word had spread of the rival pack's fall. Supplies had arrived from the capital. Guards now stood at the edges, not to control, but to protect. Leora noticed the change, but she did not smile. She worked as she always had. She helped repair roofs. She shared meals. She spoke softly to those who had forgotten how to hope. But when night fell, she sat alone. She thought of the man in the cloak, the way he listened, the way he stood beside her when the wolves howled. She did not miss the king. She missed the truth she had believed in. That evening, footsteps approached the clearing. She did not turn. "You should not be here," she said calmly. "I know," the king replied. He stood at the edge of the light, not crowned, not cloaked, dressed simply as a traveler once more. "I did not come as your ruler," he said. "I came as a man who failed." She faced him then. "You came too late," she said. "I know," he said again. Silence stretched between them. "At the stronghold," she said, "you chose silence." "Yes, and now?" "I choose honesty." She waited. "I believed power could protect," he said, "so I hid it. I believed distance could keep hearts pure, so I watched." He took a step closer, then stopped. "I was wrong." Her expression did not soften. "You saw me as a lesson," she said. "I saw you as hope," he replied, "but I treated you like a test." The wind moved through the trees. "I will not ask you to forgive me," he said. "I will not ask you to follow me. I will not even ask you to stay." He lowered his head. "I only ask you to know this. I would break my crown before I ever let it break you again." Something in her eyes shifted, not warmth, not trust, but truth. "Why now?" she asked. "Because a king who cannot kneel is no king at all." He knelt, not in command, not in display, in choice. The ground was cold, the earth silent. Leora's breath caught. No one had ever knelt for her. "Stand up," she said quietly. He did not. "Not yet," he said. "Let me finish." She nodded once. I tested my pack because I feared corruption, he said, but I forgot the greatest danger was myself, power without humility. Authority without listening. He looked up. You fed me when I was nothing, and I treated that gift like a mirror, not a promise. Tears burned her eyes, but she did not let them fall. What do you want from me? She asked. I want to earn your trust, he said. Even if it takes my lifetime, even if it never ends in love. The word lingered between them. She turned away, staring into the forest. You cannot be both, she said, a ruler and a shadow. I know, he said, so I will choose. She turned back sharply. Choose what? Change? The Alpha King returned to his castle at dawn. By noon, the kingdom was in shock. The throne room filled as nobles gathered, murmuring, confused. The king stood before them without armor. I have ruled from above, he said. Now I will rule among. Gasps spread. I name a council of voices, he continued. Farmers, healers, guards, omegas, not symbols but people. Whispers turned to silence. And I will walk my lands without disguise, he said, so I never forget who I serve. An advisor stepped forward. And the Omega, the king paused. She will choose her own path, he said. As all should. Weeks passed. Leora felt the change before she saw it. Messengers came not with orders but with questions. Supplies arrived where needed most. Guards listened instead of demanded. And one day a letter came. Not sealed with a crest, written by hand. I will be in the eastern valley at first light. If you wish to speak, I will wait. If not, I will still wait. No name. She folded the letter carefully. At dawn she walked. The valley was green despite the famine, fed by a hidden stream. Wildflowers bent in the breeze. He stood there watching the horizon. You came, he said softly. Yes, she replied. They walked side by side, not touching. I will not follow you to a throne, she said. I will not ask you to, he replied. I will not be owned by title or bond. I would never cage what saved me, he said. She stopped. Then what do we become, she asked. He met her gaze. Two people, he said, choosing each other, every day. The silence this time was different. She reached out not to his hand but to his chest, resting her palm there. Then listen, she said. Not as a king, not as an alpha, he nodded. As a man, he said. She smiled just barely. The valley breathed. Above them the sky cleared. The famine did not end that day. The world did not become gentle, but something ancient shifted. A crown learned humility. An Omega claimed her voice. And a kingdom began to heal not through fear but through trust. They stood together as the sun rose higher, not bound by command, not shaped by hunger, but united by choice.